The situation in Venezuela could hardly be more complex. The United States, along with some 24 countries, is backing the new interim leader, Juan Guaido. Russia and China support the incumbent Nicolas Maduro. How's it going to play out? My guest this week here in Brussels is Claudia Salerno Caldera, who is Venezuela's ambassador to the European Union. With a record of appalling human rights abuses, does Mr. Maduro deserve to stay in office? Claudia Salerno Caldera, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you.
In the afternoon of January 24th, in the slum of Jose Felix Ribas in Caracas, a 27-year-old man, Yohendry Fernandez, was stopped by police officers at gunpoint and asked if he had a criminal record. He replied yes. The officers then dragged him into an alley and shot him dead with 2 bullets in the chest, this according to his family and a witness. If your president is doing this to your people, why should he stay in office?
I don't have any recordings regarding this incident, at least not formally, so I don't know if you have a report from the ministry, the public ministry, to make that notice beyond what you are stating.
This isn't the first time such a thing has been reported, has it? By dawn the next day, the police Special Action Force, known as FAES, had killed as many as 10 people and taken a dozen hooded prisoners. This according to 4 local community leaders there. Again, I ask you, if this is what the president is doing to his people, why should he stay in office?
Well, the first thing is I have to just correct you. If these are crimes that are being committed, it's not the president the one that is doing it. The penal responsibilities are direct and personal.
The buck stops with him. Murder of his own people, the buck stops with him. It always does.
The penal responsibility and the criminal one is a personal and individual one. It cannot be an objective collectivity responsibility. But secondly...
But these people are never brought to justice, are they?
Secondly, only the public ministry is the institution able to announce those kind of issues, and prosecutions should be done. If that is the case, that should be reported to the authorities to be investigated. I'm not saying no, I'm just saying that the channels are there and the institutions are there to complain and to follow investigations regarding whatever crime that happened in any country.
Ambassador, these killings were just business as usual, weren't they? And they were duly witnessed by families and communities, as the government intended they should be, as a warning to other people, wasn't it?
That is your interpretation of things. Again, the families always have the ministry, the Fiscalia, open, and the institutions open to make the investigations that are required. It's just...
They don't seem to be making those investigations, and widespread human rights reports have talked about the impunity, continuing impunity for repeated crimes of this nature over many years. This isn't something new I'm raising. It may have happened in the last couple of weeks, but this has been a pattern which has been widely documented and reported on by international bodies and countries and human rights reports, as well as those in your own country.
So I'm going to report you to the only body that actually is allowed and there to follow up this kind of complexities and realities. It's not opinions of organizations.
They're based on facts.
Venezuela is part of the Human Rights Council in the UN, and we actually...
And has been condemned in the UN Human Rights Council.
No, we haven't. You have the wrong information. We presented our report last year, and we came out with only 11 recommendations, and all of them were fulfilled.
At pretty much the same time as the latest killings were taking place, you gave an interview.
The ones that you assume happened, because we don't have any proof.
You gave an interview to the magazine Cuba Socialista, in which you said Maduro always dealt with the critical situation with love and always with an open hand to dialogue with the most radical of groups. Shooting people in the slums is a sign of the president's love, is it? And his open hand.
Then again, you are making your conjectures about a situation. You have nothing, at least as from now, announced in your documents that sustain whatever claims you are making. In the second hand, I have to say, yes, he handled two very difficult situations of riots, were very violent in the country, that were promoted by some and a few opponents, parties in the country, and those riots were handled with a lot of love and patience, and actually kept the country in peace afterwards.
With all these killings, you claim. Well, it's not me who's claiming them; it's the human rights groups. But your president seems to have ignored all the warnings that he's been given by the international community, including one last month from the High Commissioner for Human Rights, UN Human Rights, the senior UN human rights official, who warned him not to repeat what she called the patterns of repression previously documented by the UN human rights bodies. You claim you got a good bill of health. In particular, she said, the widespread arbitrary detentions, restrictions to freedom of assembly and expression, and indiscriminate house raids and attacks. That is the view of the senior UN human rights official. Do you read these documents?
Yes, we took note of it, and
did nothing about it.
Let me inform you, because you are asking me. Right after this statement made by her, she received a formal invitation from the government, and it's about to happen, the official visit of Madame Bachelet to the country in these next few days.
You think she didn't know what she was talking about when she said this?
It's not that.
The patterns of repression previously documented.
I wouldn't not even dare to say that she doesn't know what she's talking about, but actually the only system that the UN has provided itself to prove what is happening is actually visits in the ground. And that didn't happen until now, that the government actually hand the hand to invite her formally, and she's about to go in the next few days, as I said.
According to the Venezuelan group Forum Peñal, the number of political prisoners estimated at the end of last year was 230. This is a network of defense lawyers who act for free. How many more opponents of your president are going to be arrested while he clings to power?
The first thing that we need to solve with the Foro Penal and other bodies that are claiming about or making the denouncements about political prisoners is actually the concept of what it is, a political crime. I don't think that many of the people that are right now being prosecuted by the public ministry are there because of their political views, but actually because of specific actions. The lawyers say that's why they are there.
There are 230 at least.
They are not political prisoners in my country. They are prisoners that are politicians. This is a different thing.
I'll come back to the violence later, but I want to draw attention first to an interview which you gave just over a year ago, in which you claimed proudly that for the last 18 years, Venezuela had been showing the world that socialism could work. Yeah. Millions have voted with their feet and fled your country. The economy is in free fall with the world's highest annual inflation rate, estimated now at 1.7 million%, and the UN and the Organization of American States accuse you of a pattern of repression, and this is socialism working, is it?
It is. I have to explain why.
It's a socialist catastrophe, isn't it? Let's be honest about it.
No, the only catastrophic thing is actually the decision made by the government of the U.S. since 2015 that declared us and our country a threat and an amazing threat for the security of the U.S. And since then, acting against our economy and our financial freedoms to be able to handle economically the country. So, of course, even with circumstances of blockage, and right now recently adding a more critical approach to our commercial limits, holding actually our goods and our accounts internationally, compelling the country to be able to trade freely, even though in that circumstances the country is providing to its people. When you said that they are millions flying, they are
3 million have left the country.
That is the number that actually whom made?
It's from international organizations.
Which is called?
It's from the UN. It's from the Organization of American States.
I'm going to give you UN numbers, actually. Only 1.7 according to the regional agreement, or the plan for migration that was agreed in Geneva in December last year. talk about 1.7, which actually among them...
This 1.7 million is your estimated rate of inflation.
No, 1.7, I'm talking about the migration plan, and then I'm going to talk about inflation, which of course is the consequences of a blockage that is unbearable for any country.
It's not just the consequence of a blockage. I'll come on to the economy in more detail in a minute, but so far more than 20 countries are demanding that your president holds new presidential elections because the ones that took place last year were widely judged to have been rigged, weren't they? They were rejected by, among others, the UN, the EU, the US, the Organization of American States, and 14 members of the Lima Group.
So I have to correct you. The UN, in the Security Council, the debate was held last week, and they didn't have an agreement regarding your point. Actually, it was in the contrary. They recognized at the Security Council, with the voices of 24 against 14 in a debate that was called for the US, they actually recognized President Maduro as president, and they said that the only way that the country could solve their issues was in their own methods and among Venezuelans with no intervention. When you mention OAS, which is the regional organism...
Organization of American States.
Exactly the same panorama, only 19 voices were calling these elections to be undefined, and you know that they need 23.
You knew the vote was going to be rigged because you refused to accredit international election monitors, didn't you?
Oh no, I have to then again correct your information. Actually, I can prove that in the early days of April last year, even the EU was formally invited to observe, and the UN as well. So
really, the only people who certified your elections was a left-wing group called CELA, which you are reported to be funding in part or wholly,
all the countries
and which has a record of delivering, and which has a record of delivering questionable election results. And last May's presidential election, Ambassador, it wasn't the first one you rigged, was it? The election of a constituent assembly in 2017, which overnight stripped the existing National Assembly of all its legislative powers because it was dominated by the opposition. That too was rigged, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. Actually, the National Constituency Assembly doesn't have the same prerogatives as the National Assembly. They are, by constitution, above all the powers. They have to rule all over the powers, including the executive power. So it was an election that was called publicly, that count also with observers from all over the world. If certain countries didn't want to participate, or certain group of countries didn't want to participate as observers, you cannot claim by then that the election is not valid.
In July that year, the Carter Center, which once praised your election system, wrote, after this election, on top of the fact that the election was illegal, the Electoral Council broke every rule in the Book of Electoral Integrity. This election destroyed any vestiges of democracy that might have still existed in Venezuela. That was with your friends at the Carter Center.
No, it's actually surprising that you just mentioned the Carter Center, that it wasn't there in that particular election. So I don't think that those that did not participate in the process as observers can actually claim or criticize a process that they didn't witness. It is
they have their representatives in the country.
Not. So in basis of what
you think
they
don't
that.
Talk to anybody? You seem to be living in a parallel world, no, Ambassador. You deny all the accusations that are coming your way. I'm just correcting
the ones with real facts. If you don't like the real facts, that's another issue, but I'm just giving you the real facts as they are.
The real fact is that in 2018, the Organization of American States recommended referring your government to the International Criminal Court. Fact. Its report said there were grounds to believe that your government had committed crimes against humanity.
You didn't got the votes there.
Including murder, torture, rape, and other forms of sexual violence, persecution, and informed disappearances. Last February, the chief prosecutor at the court opened a preliminary examination of the evidence. Fact. The Organization of American States cited at least 8,298 cases of extrajudicial execution committed, they said, as part of a widespread or systematic attack against the civilian population, targeting members of the opposition or those identified as such. Thousands of people, it said, had been persecuted, and you seem to ignore all
No,
this.
I'm not ignoring. I'm just realizing that you are making a very dangerous confusion when you actually speak about the organization at large, and you are talking about the executive secretary of that organization. It's a different thing.
There was sufficient consensus to have it referred to the International Criminal Court.
Sufficient consensus is an oxymoron.
And the chief prosecutor opened an examination of the facts.
Well, now the International Criminal Court will have their time to make their evaluations and define, but you cannot just pronounce yourself and take position before even the court.
Ambassador, these are the members of the Lima Group that have voiced support for the opposition leader Juan Guaido. They include Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Paraguay, and Peru. So when you tweeted last week that in the face of, as you put it, the irresponsible civility of Europe in support of Trump's putsch attempt in Venezuela, Latin America makes its commitment to peace clear. You said that. You forgot to mention that while most of Latin America does want peace, it also wants Nicolas Maduro out.
But you forget that actually CARICOM, for example, which is a group of 15 states, go in the other direction. So when you talk about Latin America, you're completely forgetting Caribbean region, which is part of our region. So I don't think that you can just see the picture that you like.
Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Paraguay, and Peru, they don't count for anything.
They have their views, and they were pronounced themselves, and they actually participate actively in the debate and in the Security Council. They were there. They spoke. They have their voice raised, and their claims were there on the table at the level of ministers of foreign affairs. It is only that at the Security Council they didn't got the position.
You're clutching at straws, Ambassador. You're clutching at straws. One of the worst aspects of this crisis is that you continue to refuse substantial offers of international aid that could go some way to alleviating the poverty and distress of your people, which you have imposed on them. Last October, experts from the UN and the Inter-American Commission of Rights appealed to your government to act urgently to mobilize necessary and available resources, including through international cooperation. They said Venezuela was at crisis point, but you said no. So it's clear you don't care about the health of your people, isn't it? It's quite clear.
How much you are talking about? The $20 million that actually the U.S. offered us last week. Are you talking about that?
No, I'm not. I'm talking about what was offered last October when the experts from the UN and the Inter-American Commission of Rights appealed to you to accept aid.
Yes, then I'm going to refer to the offers that were made. I mean, 50 million from the European countries are going, and they were approved last December to help the border countries that are receiving migrants from Venezuela, to help them to handle what they call a migrant crisis. No one of these euros is being implemented in this region, but that is another issue. So this is not about the crisis. This is about a political decision that was made to strangle our economy and to make us suffer until having a regime change. That is the only thing that is happening here.
Why do you cover up the full extent of the crisis? Why are your health statistics secret?
I don't understand your...
Dr. Humanitarian Urbina, president of the Venezuelan Society of Childcare and Pediatrics, said in 2017, in some public hospitals, he said, the clinical diagnosis of malnutrition has been prohibited.
I'm not...
The diagnosis, so your doctors are being told, find some other reason that these children are ill because the state doesn't like this diagnosis.
I thank you for raising that point, which I think is crucial, because I'm a mother. Of course, I care about what is happening with children and whichever person that is suffering right now in my country. It's not that the government or whoever is in charge doesn't care. It's the fact that whenever you find another ways, right now the situation, and you cannot just ignore it, as you asked me not to ignore the positions of certain group of countries, I ask you not to ignore the fact that right now all the international accounts of the country to trade freely are closed, hold. back from the U.S.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the climate of fear among the doctors.
No, you are talking about something else. You are talking about the needs of the children.
I'm talking about you covering up the extent of the crisis. In 2016, Dr. Huniadis said there's a real climate of fear. He said, in this kind of government, every time you say the truth, they tell you you're breaking the law. But I'm an old man, he said, so I've got nothing to lose. A climate of fear. Are you proud of that?
No, I'm quite someone that is known by always saying the truth. I mean, I have made my name on that, and I would be in prison already. I always speak my mind, and I never would stay quiet regarding injustice because that's my formation. But I will tell you, you cannot request a country to fulfill the needs of the population when you block the accounts, when you hold medications in the borders, not allowing these ships to arrive to the country. And right now, more recently, you uphold all the payments for oil, which is the first revenue of the country. Which country would it handle economically?
You like to blame everyone else for your problems, I know, but in the main, your economic problems resulted from the almost inconceivable incompetence of your government, didn't it? We also know that the corruption and drug dealing has now entered even the family members of the president's wife, hasn't it? Directly involved in narcotics smuggling. 2 of her nephews were convicted in the US in 2016, sentenced to 18 years jail on drug trafficking charges. That's how high the corruption goes these days in Venezuela, isn't it?
You're combining narcotraffics with corruption? I mean, those are...
Oh, doesn't the money from one feed the other?
I mean, it's just, you are just turning around different facts that are not necessarily linked with what is happening right now, and you are just trying to...
Drug trafficking is not linked to corruption.
No, it's just, I'm not saying that. This is a legal procedure that had its own path, and that accusation and that actually sentence is now being recused by the lawyers. So I'm not anyone to pronounce myself about a legal case that is in the US system.
They confessed their guilt. The 2 nephews, Campo Flores and Flores de Freitas, they confessed their guilt at the trial.
If the prosecution actually makes an arrangement and they are free next week, are you going to be ready to set differently? I would not.
Who says they're going to be free next week?
I'm not going to merge myself
as a diplomat. Let's deal with facts. You want to deal with facts.
In an issue. It's a legal fact.
You want to deal with facts, and now you're telling me, oh, well, supposing they get released in the future. Let's deal with the facts. They're behind bars.
Are those international facts?
They're behind bars.
I don't think so. Are those...
They were convicted by a court.
But are you asking me things about a diplomatic arena? I don't think so. You are just, I mean, if you want to gossiping with me, I invite you coffee, but I don't think it's the purpose of having me in front of you to talk about something that can make us understand each other better, with realities, of course.
How long do you think President Maduro can hold on now?
6 years, I hope, because that is what the people voted for.
The European Union, the European Parliament voted to recognize the interim self-declared President Juan Guaido.
I think it's not like
the
that.
The European Parliament voted. Yeah. Now we have France, Spain, Germany and Britain who have recognized the new interim leader as president. How long can you go on with this? People are defecting from the administration. One of your colleagues, Venezuelan Ambassador to Iraq, defected, accusing Maduro of violating the Constitution.
That is his right.
An Air Force general in the Air Force. A military attaché in Washington. Your military attaché in Washington has gone. How long can he hold on, do you think?
It doesn't depend on that. I mean, a president doesn't hold on because of foreign countries ask them or like them or not.
He's impoverished the country and he's subjected it to massive repression.
I remember in 2002, there was an attempt of coup, similar and not as radical and open as the one that is happening right now, but actually at that time, let me just recall you for what it is support nationally. 135 high-rank militaries actually said that they didn't recognize President Chavez as the president of the country. And President Chavez stood in power until 2013 that he died. So when you said 2 militaries, 1 ambassador, That's their opinions. That doesn't make democracy. I mean, whenever you want to put your views before you have elections to do it, and we had it in May last year, and the majority of the people
widely judged to be rigged.
A president.
Widely judged to be rigged.
Why European countries have to say if they like a government or not of a country that it doesn't belong to their system? I mean, the European Parliament
because
doesn't
there
even
is international law that you are violating.
let me talk about that I love.
Your international
The European Parliament doesn't
time.
have any competences to talk about recognitions or not. Is the Council the only one that has those prerogatives? And actually, what Federica Mogherini announced on Wednesday, Friday, last week, was actually this proposal of creating a contact group to talk and then to let to each country to define what the position was going to be regarding the things that are happening in Venezuela. But let me go beyond that. States doesn't recognize governments. There is no legal basis for that move. States recognize and talk with the states.
All right. Ambassador, we've run out of time. Thanks very much for being on Conflict Zone.
Thank you.
Thank you.